talk a little college football, as we always do, but beyond just Texas A&M, we go to Pete Fiutak there on the Brian Foley Law Hotline from College Football News. Pete, how you been, bud?
I'm doing all right. So I actually don't know. What's your take on Elko now that you didn't want Stoops and the Aggie Nation rose up and rocked against that? What's the thought on an Elko hiring?
Super excited about it. Look, I'm going to make this super simple for you, Pete. I don't think it takes that much to be really good at A&M. I'm not talking Final Four college football playoffs good. I'm talking about 9-10 win consistently good, I think should be bar minimum, the minimum here. And all you need is a coach who's willing to adapt and also hold people accountable. And I think with the resources at A&M, the NIL, if you have a really good coach, you're going to win well here. Jimbo, I think, ran out of favor, he didn't evolve enough. I think Mike Elko has seen it from the inside out, knows what's needed, the discipline that is needed. A defensive-minded head coach who's bringing in a really good staff, I feel like. I think he's a really good hire. I understand why they swung for the fences, maybe trying to find out what was up with Ryan Day and whatnot, other big-name coaches. I think he just feels right. The community knows him, and he's already endeared himself to the Texas high school football coaches, so I think it's a no-brainer. He was always in the 1A, 1B, 1C conversation. If you don't get Day, maybe Elko. It was always that. And he just feels right, and it speaks to me as a fan and as the kind of leader I think he'll be.
Yeah, and the goalposts moved. I mean, how many times I'm sure you figured this out, how many times would Jimbo have gone to a expanded college football playoff, or at least been in the mix going into the final week of the regular season? I mean, because now, going forward, you're right. I mean, we've talked about this before. You talk about the programs that are bound by absolutely nothing. That's Texas A&M. I mean, there's zero excuse. I mean, NIL money isn't a problem. Facilities, fan base. I mean, this is the program that's always done the least with the most. And now you don't have to go 11-1. You don't have to beat Bama every year. You just, like you said, it's not even 9 wins. The goal's got to be 10 wins, because that 10-2 gets you to the college football playoff in an expanded era. That 10-2 will always put Texas A&M in the top 11. And that's got to be the bar each and every year. Now, it's going to be too tough to say, hey, win the national championship every year. And I know that some places that's how it's going to be, but that's not really, really realistic. It really is, can you get into the tournament every single year? And that's probably where this has to be set. And, again, Jimbo was able to recruit. He was able to get the guys there. Can Elko do that at Jimbo's level and take them to do this? All right, we'll see. We'll see how this works out.
Look, one of the things about Jimbo, and I really liked Jimbo, I thought it was going to work out until I didn't think it was going to work out, right? And it was probably between the 5 and 7 in the early part of this year. But he didn't evolve. And I think he showed a lot of loyalty to some assistant coaches that maybe didn't need the loyalty that he showed them. Like, I've said this 1,000 times. Our viewers and listeners are probably sick of me saying it. If you just learn how to block, this is a 10-win team every year. They did not block well the last 3 years. Every quarterback got hurt.
And you could argue that this might have been the first year that Florida State finally recovered from not having an offensive line from the end of the Jimbo Fisher era, because you can totally mark when Florida State turned. It was the opener 2009. I got the date wrong. Obviously, it's later than that. But DeAndre Francois, when he got tattooed in the opener against Alabama, that was it. The Florida State pivoted from there and never recovered. Why? Because that offensive line was never quite right there. They couldn't get it right under Willie Taggart, and it took years and years to get it to this point. And that's kind of the problem. In the SEC, he's able to get defensive guys. This year's defense was great. He was never really quite able to get the offensive line and the offense in place outside of 2020. It all worked. But you're right in terms of pivoting going forward. But like even programs that do pivot, like LSU pivoted this year, and they did advance. They did crank up the offense. Still didn't win anything, but it's life in the SEC. But again, going forward, this has been an 8 to 9 win program. Again, you should be able to get to 10 wins on a regular basis, because that's just where Texas A&M should be at the very least.
At the very least. And so what are your thoughts on Elko? What he did at Duke, what he did here at other stops, Notre Dame as well, and now leading the pack?
No idea. You never know until you get the guy in there. You could say anything's the right fit. Oh, this guy's great. He knows this guy. The stats bear out that it's not going to work. I mean, by work, I mean like be what Texas A&M fans, because the stats are unbelievable. I mean, the odds are of getting a guy who's going to be your head coach and win 60% of his games for over the next 5 years are staggeringly low. It's something crazy. Like out of the 133 current head football coaches, there's only like 12 who've been able to do that. Like you always think, oh, this guy wins. Like, oh, it's so easy for all the Ohio State fans are mad at Ryan Day right now because he can't beat Michigan. Guy wins 83% of his games. James Franklin, Penn State fans can't get rid of him fast enough. He wins 74% of his games. Those are unicorns. I mean, that doesn't exist. So it could work. Let's see. Again, any name you brought in, even if you brought in Ryan Day, you've got Jimbo Fisher, who had the national championship bona fides. So until you get the guy in the system, is he the next Dabo? Is he? I mean, Dabo wasn't Dabo. Clemson was awful or mediocre for like 4 years before they turned it over. So to say to Kate, Mike Elko, come in right away and be an SEC superstar, that's asking a little bit, but that's what you're going to be expecting because, look, LSU did that with Brian Kelly. They got a superstar head coach, and they've been exciting. Now that fan base is going to want a little more than that. Obviously, Alabama's not going anywhere next year. And I could be right here, but I don't think you even play the Tide next season. But yeah, so going forward, he's a rock solid head coach. If you can win at Duke, you can win pretty much anywhere else.
Pete, the direction college football is going, and I'm talking transfer portal, NIL, all these things that are a weekly topic on sports radio shows around the country. It can't continue in the direction it's going. It's going to continue. I don't know how they fix it, but it really can't for the life of the sport the way we know it. It's evolving, it's changing, but can it stay like the way it is now?
You'd think the market would bear it out. The problem is when you have, and actually your school is probably ground zero for having the alumni base with the means and the wherewithal to try to be able to put the collectives together to do this. As we're starting to see, and my thought on this is if I were running a collective, I'd say I'm going after the lines. I mean, I could get any quarter. I mean, the quarterback transfer portal's loaded. You can get guys who can just rise up and be okay. Running backs are a dime a dozen, but it's hard to get those lines in place. And as we're kind of seeing now, who's paying for the quarterbacks and the stars? Well, the mid-tier teams. Because if you're USC, I'm dead serious here. If I'm Lincoln Riley at USC, I'm like, you pay us if you want to be my quarterback. Because if you want to include Caleb Williams in this, he's going to have like $1 billion worth of NFL quarterbacks that he's gotten his lineage there. So in Ohio State, same thing. You want to go to the NFL and be a star? You want to be our quarterback and all the NIL money with that? Okay, agent, you flip your guy the money. We're not paying him to come here. We should be able to get our pick of anybody. So the market's going to bear it out. I do think there has to, and I'm a players' rights advocate. I believe all the players should be able to get everything if a coach can leave. But where it's going to really bear out and we're going to see it right smack in our faces is going to be over the next 3 weeks because this bowl season is going to be god awful. I mean, I think it's something we're up to like 30 teams now that aren't going to have their starting quarterback because they're either getting out or in the transfer portal or something. And each of these teams are going to be shells of their former selves because of the transfer portal and because some are losing coaches. And it's going to be a rough 3 weeks, and it is going to continue to be the topic of conversation.
Talking to Pete Fiutak here on TexAgs Radio. Pete, let's talk a little bit about what the portal has meant for quarterbacks, though. Like, I 100% understand your point about, you go to these programs that maybe they should be paying them because of what happens, but it has behooved a lot of quarterbacks to move. Michael Penix, for instance, Jaden Daniels. Like, it has really helped out their trajectory.
Bo Nix, your world. SEC fans couldn't laugh loud. Oh, ha, Oregon, you're getting Bo Nix. Good luck with that. Turned out to be all right. However, in the college football playoff era, we've had 2 transfer quarterbacks who won the national title. One was Joe Burrow, who was not Joe Burrow when he left Ohio State to get to LSU. He progressed there. And remember, even his first year at LSU, he was like, okay, and then took that step forward to be amazing in that offense. And now he's Joe Burrow, one of the best quarterbacks in the world. And the other was Jake Coker, who was just left Florida State because they just had other guys there. The quarterbacks who've won national championships: Trevor Lawrence, Stetson Bennett, Deshaun Watson. I mean, you still have to have the guys who are kind of grow up in the system. And this year, pretty good shot to the national championship winning quarterbacks, either J.J. McCarthy or Jalen Milroe. So it still has not really proven out in the national championship mix. But obviously, it's a good thing overall for college football because every team's got a restaurant quality quarterback. You don't have teams that you just can't function at quarterback anymore because everyone's got at least one guy from the transfer portal who's all right. So that is a pretty decent instant fix if you're a mid-range, mid-level team.
Pete, next season, Ole Miss, it looks like they're getting Jackson Dart to come back, Quinshon Judkins, Trey Harris. With what Lane's been able to do there, I mean, it feels like it's sustainable, does it not?
I just dogged the whole idea of, a coach, you never know. I could not be a bigger Lane Kiffin apologist. He was better than people thought at Tennessee. He got a horrendous break at USC because that's right when they got put in the coma penalty for Reggie Bush. He's always gotten the knock because he's Lane Kiffin and he's just does Lane Kiffin things. The guy wins everywhere. I mean, winning at Ole Miss is not a given. And he's been able to put this team pretty much in the mix. And this year, he probably would have had if this is next year, Ole Miss might have been really might have made that push into the college football playoff. I mean, again, he's doing this at a place that's not as traditionally great as people might think it is. And Ole Miss is going to be great again. So is Texas. So is Oklahoma. So is Alabama. Auburn's going to be better. Texas A&M is going to be a lot better. LSU is probably going to have a defense. So it just kind of still gets thrown into the pile where if this is the normal 14 playoff going forward, you're like, okay, Lane Kiffin's doing an amazing job. They'll probably go 9-3-ish next year and get to a pretty decent bowl again. But going forward, there's going to be four to five teams from the SEC that every year are going to say, we should be in the new college football playoff. And if you're Ole Miss, that's where he's set the bar now because he's proven that he can go 10-2 in Oxford.
December 12th, 2023. Do you have a couple favorites for next year's Heisman? Just a couple days removed from Jaden Daniels winning?
I mean, how is it not Milroe? I mean, I think I was shocked he was underappreciated in the Heisman voting. He was on my ballot. I mean, Daniels, the historic year, obviously you had to. But really, if you take out the first three games, which were, I can't remember who they played to start the season, but Middle Tennessee and then Texas and then the UCF game. And then things kicked off for him in Alabama once they started against Ole Miss. If you're looking at just the SEC season, how is Jalen Milroe not the SEC Player of the Year? I mean, I know Daniels put up the stats, but he didn't do anything important. He didn't have an important win other than getting by Missouri. Whereas Milroe had the Play of the Year in college football against Auburn. He won the Game of the Year by getting by Georgia in a good performance. He outplayed Daniels in the head-to-head, even though Daniels missed most of part of that game. And he got Alabama. He changed the college football season by improving. So you're talking about a guy who, again, I think he should have been the SEC Player of the Year. Deserved a lot more Heisman credit for being, the MVP, MOP, most outstanding, and all that kind of stuff this season. And now he's back with an Alabama team that's going to be Alabama again next year. So he's the one. And then it just who's the USC quarterback? Is it Cam Ward? Who's the Ohio State starting quarterback? So now it's just about that transfer portal. I mean, Riley Leonard today just went to Notre Dame, which everyone kind of knew. He's better than Sam Hartman. He should actually put up some pretty big numbers. But we know it now. And this is where you said that when I dogged the whole transfer portal thing before about national championships, this is where the Heisman comes into play because you get these guys who might have been okay before, makes the switch, finds his home, and all of a sudden, boom, DJ Uiagalelei. If he goes to Florida State, he's a Heisman candidate. So it really does depend where all these quarterbacks land in the big quarterback spots.
Pete, Nick Saban's obviously already the GOAT, right? Like, it's going to be hard to add to his legacy. But I kind of feel like if he wins this year, when the third week of the season, people are like, this is an 8-7 win team. If he wins the championship this year, like, how do you switch the conversation from the GOAT to already the GOAT?
He's not ready to go. He is. I mean, there's no argument. I mean, in this era, I mean, it's insane. Like, again, I pointed out those stats before about just finding a coach to win 60% of his games for 5 years. That's rare. Even at the biggest of big programs, it's shocking how hard that is to do because there's always a clunker in there somewhere. You don't maintain this success like Saban's been able to do. And I don't quite buy into this is his best coaching job and all that kind of stuff. Alabama's done this before. They lost early in the season to an Ole Miss twice. They lost to Manziel one year. I mean, they've done it before and come back roaring and winning the national championship. But it's just having the process. It's just having that system. And he's still got talent. This is not some little engine that could program. It's just so kind of doing this. And this is where, the whole Florida State debate kind of falls flat. It's like, we're not going to the wall here for going hard on a rogue Kentucky team or like a Purdue squad that had a great year. I mean, it's Alabama. How do you really argue against this? And he's still got the talent Alabama's going to have more talent than anybody else out there, except maybe, on the right here, Ohio State or Georgia, or at least it's right up there. So, but he's just consistently amazing because this is just not easy to do. And, look at Ohio State. It's having a hard time getting back there. Georgia didn't get back there this year. I mean, LSU has everything in place and couldn't get back there. So to do this every single year, obviously the guy's amazing. And obviously what he's created is just unbelievable.
Pete, this is the Aggie and me talking right now, all right? So don't take offense, but I'm going to come at you about something. I was going to ask you earlier, you had your top 20 potential Heisman winners for next year, right?
Yeah.
I see Kay Klubnik on there. I see some other names on. I didn't see Connor Weigman. I saw Graham Mertz on there. Is that because we haven't seen what this offense is going to look like with Colin Klein, or is it because of his injury, or is it like – because I feel like he was playing at that level that he would be above Graham Mertz and Kay Klubnik if he would have been able to finish the season.
Yeah, it's more of the list really is kind of more. I mean, the bottom edge of the list is about the potential finalists in the never know category. I mean, Jaden Daniels was not on the list last year. I mean, there's always those guys. I mean, we had Michael Penix on there last year in the preseason thing. I mean, there's the guys you can kind of figure out. Yeah, they're next up and in, but. Cam Newton came from out of nowhere. Johnny Manziel came from out of nowhere. Joe Burrow, Kenny Pickett, last year, Max Duggan. I mean, all of the time these finalists come from out of nowhere. Really with Klubnik and Drew Aller, that's just more like these are first round caliber quarterback talents who should be in the mix if everything works out right. Sure. Okay. How this works. If Weigman rises up and he has a big game against Texas and everyone sees it, all of a sudden you're a Heisman candidate. So really this list is about kind of like having just the guys on there who should be in the mix, maybe not win it, but should be in the mix maybe and try to cover all the bases there. So sure, throw Weigman. Mertz is on there only because he completed like 99% of his passes or something like that last year. And maybe this starts to work in this offense and he's older, he's got the talent and all that sort of in place. So that's the reason why this is in place. But as I say to everyone, if you can find the field when it comes to a December 12th or whatever date it is, 2024 early bets, go for the field because there's always that guy who we just don't see coming who rises up and rocks. And hey, why not Weigman in this offense?
Let's close out with this. Florida State, where do you see them? Is this Big Ten thing real? Do you see them getting out sooner than expected, or is it just a lot of complaining because of what happened to them?
Oh, there's a lot of complaining. It's the Big Ten would like Florida State. The SEC already had. I mean, remember how this kind of works when it comes to expansion? Is that it's about how do you increase your footprint in your markets? I get yelled at for this. I think the SEC completely botched expansion. I mean, they got Texas and Oklahoma great, but they didn't expand further. They didn't read the room. Where now the Big Ten, it's coast to coast. It's the LA teams have to fly to Rutgers every once in a while, but they literally go from one side of the coast to the other to up top now with Oregon and Washington. It is a national conference, and because of it, and because they have the markets, all of a sudden the next. Mark my words, in 3 years, Texas A&M, Alabama, all these SEC teams are going to want somehow some sort of change because they're going to see the Big Ten teams. They're all getting $80 to $100 million, where the SEC teams are going to get $50 to $70 million because they just expanded better. So if you're the SEC, taking Florida State doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because you already got Florida. You already got these sort of markets. You needed to expand further out than that. For the Big Ten, yeah, you get into SEC country, you get to Tallahassee. That's a new market for the Big Ten. Just like they could get, like they really want North Carolina or Virginia to expand in that sort of way. So it really is, how do you expand the market for there? But it is a lot of screaming right now from Florida State because they just want out of the ACC because they're Max. They feel slighted about what happened in the college football playoff.
Well, let me follow up with this then. Do you expect, because in the SEC has never been a team, a conference to make moves because of others, but now if they do add Florida State, does that kind of like, all right, well, maybe we really do need to speed this up with North Carolina and Virginia and whatnot?
North Carolina is the white whale. That's the one everyone wants because it's a different market, because of the academics, because of the basketball program that comes along. Obviously not just for the ride, but it's football that drives everything. It's North Carolina is really the one that everyone wants. But sure, if the SEC's obviously would be a whole lot better, even if it adds Florida State to an already nasty mix, because you kind of see where this is going. And this whole argument, like, oh my gosh, it's only going to be the SEC and Big Ten going forward. Well, what do you think it is now? I mean, as is, 45% of the upcoming NFL draft is going to be SEC and Big Ten players, because that's what it's always been. You basically have an SEC versus Big Ten college football playoff now, and that's just kind of the SEC. It is the SEC, but the Big Ten is on another level from that. So the Big Ten can pretty much do whatever it wants, and if it really wants Florida State, exit fees are not going to be a problem. Grant of rights deals are not going to be a problem for that conference.
Pete, I appreciate you, brother. Thanks so much.
Anytime. You have a great week.
You too. Pete Fiutak, College Football News, joining us here on the program.